The subject that I chose to talk about tonight relates to what happened this weekend. Well, what happened this weekend? You don't know because it's something that happened in our family. You see, my wife and I are both privileged to be able to teach in the all-girls high school here in Houston. Yes, there's an all-girls Jewish high school, and my wife really teaches there, and I come in twice a week just for a 40-minute class, one on Monday morning and one on Tuesday morning. But once a year, the entire school goes to a retreat called a Shabbaton for the weekend, for Shabbos. And they rent out a nice ranch, and they have a robust program, and the girls make the food, and they have a very nice Shabbos meals, and a very rich program. So Friday night, it's kind of my slot. We come with our family, not everyone. The older boys are not invited. And even the younger boys don't want to come necessarily. What? To be there were like 60 girls? They don't want to come. So the older boys actually stayed home, but they went out for meals, and the younger boys went to their friends. So we went with just the little kids, little boys and girls, and it was really delightful. And Friday night after the meal, there's like a big lecture that I have the privilege of giving. But what I want to talk about is what happened on Shabbos afternoon. So Shabbos afternoon, of course, we have 3 meals on Shabbos: Friday night dinner, Shabbos lunch, and then there's the third meal, which is Shabbos afternoon. Shalashudas. Shalashudas is known. Shalashudas means 3 meals. It's like the third meal. Or people say Seuda Shlishit, the third meal. And by the third meal, they had a panel of rabbis. So there were 5 rabbis present, and they had a panel with questions submitted by the students. And every year, the hierarchy, the top brass, is steaming how to get me off the panel, because I always insist to be on the panel, and I'm apparently not a good panelist, because a good panelist doesn't interject, is very respectful, and doesn't really challenge the questions, and doesn't challenge the assumptions, and doesn't respond and challenge the answer of the other panelist. But I like to mix things up, because otherwise it's boring. If everyone just sits there and everyone's quiet and nodding and being all respectful, then it's not fun. So I like to spice things up. And I say, no, that's not a good question. Here's why. Here's the holes in the question. We punch holes in the question. You got to be an entertainer, right? You got to make it exciting. Got to have fun. Got to learn. If you learn and it's all buttoned up and it's not dramatic and dynamic, it's not going to be educational, and it certainly won't be interesting. That's my panel philosophy. So I was like, no, they have to have a timer. It's like these petty debates that you see on television. No, it's my time to speak, timer, and a moderator. So anyhow, over the years, I'm always joking about that. They try to keep off the panel. Then one year there was a groundswell. There was an uprising. The students said, we cannot have Rabbi Wolbe off the panel because then it's no fun. Panel's not fun. Anyhow, but this year, I thought the questions were okay. It was some good questions. But what I want to do with you today is talk about some of the questions that came up on Shabbos. And I have them over here printed out. And I guess we'll do some of them. And I don't think we'll do them all, but just some interesting questions to ponder, some intriguing questions to think about, and some hopefully instructive answers that provide clarity. Okay, so the first question, I thought this was the best question. It's a very short question, but a very sharp question. Very, very sharp question. Now, every question has an assumption, at least one assumption. And this assumption is true. The assumption of this question is true. And that makes it very, very, a very intriguing question. Why sometimes, this is a quote, so if you don't like the grammar, don't blame me. Why sometimes do you have to fall lower in order to go higher? So, of course, there's an assumption in the question. Whenever you say why, it means this is true. The question is why? What's the reason for it? What's the assumption? The assumption is you have to go lower to go higher. You have to have a yerida l'tzorach aliyah, a descent for the purposes of ascent. Is that, in fact, true? Is the assumption true? So it actually is true. In fact, the Midrash says, Ilule nafalti lo kamti. If not for the fact that I fell, I would not have arisen. I would have not gotten up. And there's a very famous verse in Scripture, Sheva yipol tzaddik. V'kam. The tzaddik falls 7 times, but gets up. And the Talmud actually tells us that a great Torah sage, a great Torah scholar, who is tasked with rendering halachic opinions, and you have a halachic query, a question from the halachic sphere, what do you need to do to answer it accurately? There's a lot of work you need to do, because you have to effectively assimilate all of Torah and find all the different areas of Torah that relate to the subject matter being posed. So if you know one part of Torah, you're not really a candidate to answer the question, because maybe in that part of Torah that you know, you're able to answer and to address that element of the question. But maybe there are 15 other variables for parts of Torah that you are ignorant about, and maybe those are also critical to the question. And if you ignore those, you're going to give an inaccurate answer. So how do you actually answer a halachic query? You really have to be a master of all of Torah. And who's a master of all of Torah? At least it's very hard to be that. So the Talmud says, a person cannot accurately address and resolve accurately Torah dilemmas, Torah questions, unless they first fumble, unless they first blunder, unless they first make mistakes. Same concept. You want to do it? The only way to do it is to make mistakes and hopefully learn from your mistakes. But there is no way to do it where it's like a rocket. You just go up and up and up and up and up and up. That's the assumption of the question, and it's true. And the question is why? Why is it that you have to falter? You have to trip up. You have to fall in order to rise up, in order to ascend. Now, this is true in all sorts of areas. Like, our life, like we have ups and downs in our relationship with Hashem, in our relationship with our family, with our spouse, children, parents, colleagues, friends, in the areas of life that we're trying to improve in. You want to improve and you make progress, and then you stumble and you seem like you're going backwards. And that's an experience that anyone who knows about or anyone who is serious about trying to improve is very intimately familiar with. That you make progress, 1 step forward, and then suddenly it's 2 steps back, and you're like, maybe I should have just ignored it. Who needs the trouble? And it can be very depressing. But if this assumption is true, first of all, it's an amazing insight. You shouldn't get dejected by failure, by falling, by stumbling, by setbacks, because there's no way to avoid the setbacks. There's no way to avoid the setbacks. If you can't avoid the setbacks, it's inevitable, then it shouldn't be disheartening when it happens. It is, after all, inevitable. So the assumption itself is just very powerful. And it's very liberating, because anyone who tries to ascend has those setbacks. It's important to know that there's no other way to do it. And one of the panelists responded to this question by citing a very famous letter penned by Rabbi Hutner. And the truth is, this is a very famous letter. It's so famous that everyone else who was planning on talking was going to cite this letter. And this panelist who mentioned it just happened to have been the one that was asked first. So he mentioned it because it's a slam dunk. And what Rabbi Hutner writes is that people, when they read about this verse, 7 times the righteous falls and gets up, people think, oh, wow, even if someone falls, they can get up. Don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. Because even if you fall 7 times, that's a lot of times to fall, you could still rise up again. He says that's an inaccurate reading. The only way to become a tzaddik, the only way, is if you fall repeatedly and keep on getting up. It's not like even if someone falls, they can get up. The only way to advance, the only way to achieve a level of being a tzaddik is only via a process of ups and downs. Ups and downs. And the question, it's a very important question, is why? Why is it like that? And I think the question itself is worthy of celebration. Because first of all, like you think about the subject, it's a very valuable thing to think about. Just to think about the idea that the only way to ascend is a series of ups and downs. It's the only way to do it. It's the only way to do it. We think of the righteous as being almost like angels that are just flawless, pristine. And here we see a different system. You go up, you go down, you go up and down, and the general trend is upward. And the verse tells us 7 times you fall, and you get up. And that's the process of becoming a tzaddik. So that in itself is just worthy of ruminating upon. But the question is why? Why is it like that? Now, I had a few different thoughts about this particular question. The first idea that I was thinking, I didn't mention actually when I was speaking about it on Shabbos, because I was like the last to go. And a lot of people mentioned some other ideas. But I was thinking of the fact that, or about the idea that, what is change? What is ascent? What is transformation? It's going against your default state. If you want to become better, you want to improve, you want to become more refined, you want to become more elevated, you want to become more righteous and more learned, whatever you want to do to improve, you're going against what is there previously. So there's a certain default setting that you're trying to overcome. You're trying to transcend. You try to supersede the existing infrastructure. And that is very deeply embedded. This is who you are up to this point. For literally your entire life, you've been X. And you try to change that in a serious way, it's very hard. Because to change it, there's so many different areas and instances where that default just, once again, pops up. And therefore, it's a continuous effort of trying to install and institute the new you. That was an idea that I was thinking. But someone mentioned something very interesting. Someone mentioned that, and I didn't like this answer, but I like it. I like the concept. Someone mentioned that the Almighty is like our co-pilot. And maybe that's not the right thing to say about Almighty God. But we're trying to grow. We're trying to improve. We're trying to change. We're trying to overcome our difficulties and our challenges. We're not alone. The Almighty is there to help us. How do I know that? Because the Talmud tells us that if you're on your own, you're toast. You have no chance. You think you could overcome and outfox the Yetzer Hara by yourself? Zero chance. He's wilier and cleverer and more talented than you. Period. Sorry, he's an angel. And he has lots of experience. And he's older than you and sharper than you and more clever than you and more talented than you and with more resources than you. But you have God on your side. And therefore, you could win. There's a famous story with the Chafetz Chaim. It was a cold, cold day. And he woke up. And it was really early. Got to get up early to go daven Shachris early in the morning. But it was so cold. And he was so cozy under the bed. And he said the Yetzer Hara was telling him, you're so old. Really, really deserved a few extra minutes of sleep. And the Chafetz Chaim started talking to the Yetzer Hara and says, no, you're older than me. And you got up even earlier than me. So I can get up as well. Yeah, that's the line. He's older than you. He's working harder than you. He's more talented than you. He's more clever than you. He's wilier than you. You have no chance. But the Almighty is on your side. And the Almighty is going to help you. How does the Almighty help you? This is one of my co-panelists. One of the ways that the Almighty helps you is deliberately throw curveballs your way. When someone stumbles, it actually can be a very positive element of an ascent. Why? Because it kind of shakes you up. It It alerts you. It makes you more aware of what's happening. And actually, when you have that, it's like almost like a jolt of awareness that you can translate into further success. Someone starts to coast. They're ascending. They start to coast because that's just natural. You've gotten past it. So you're coasting. And that's a problem because you're leaving something on the table. You're settling. Once you start coasting, by definition, you are settling. And settling is intolerable because we're here to work. We're here to grow. And even if you've grown, why can't you grow further? You've overcome something great. Okay, you're not giving in the keys yet. You still have life to live. If you have life, you have opportunity. And there's more for you to grow. So if someone starts to coast, it might kind of throws them a challenge that they cannot handle, and they're going to fall. And that's all designed to put them back on a path of ascent, which is a very, very advanced idea. I don't know if I quite agree with it, but I think it's something to think about. And that's why there has to be falling. It has to be falling because that's actually part of getting someone back on track on the path of ascent. I shared an idea. I said on the podcast sometimes in the past. I really like this idea. The verse tells us that the righteous, they fall down 7 times and they get up. And they fall and they get up and they fall 7 times. Why 7 times? Why not more? Why not less? Why not fewer for the pedants amongst us? Why is it 7 times? Isn't that interesting? The verse doesn't say the righteous fall often or on occasion. That's not what it says. They fall 7 times. Not 8 and not 3. Not 6. Not 5. Not 10. It's 7. It's a very specific number. Why? So what I wanted to suggest is a novel idea. What does it mean to grow as a person? What does it mean to overcome a challenge? To advance, to change? What does it mean? Well, it means that you were person X and now you became person Y. You were suffering, or you were subjected to this particular challenge, and now you've marshaled the ability and the wherewithal to overcome it. So you're now like a different person. Our sages define our change as overcoming the Yetzer Hara. That's how they define it. What's the Yetzer Hara? It's more of a complicated question. But if we didn't have this Yetzer Hara, we'd all be angels. We'd all be angels. It is the force that prevents us from just being absolute angels. You want to know what the Yetzer Hara does to a person? It takes Adam from before his sin to Adam after his sin. Adam before his sin was a veritable angel. The angels were like so blown away by him. He was higher than the angels, way higher than the angels. You introduce the Yetzer Hara, and suddenly humans as we know it. All these flaws, default ignorance of God by default, a default lack of interest in anything spiritual, a default ignorance of our own soul. That's what the Yetzer Hara does to us. And thus every challenge is almost a confrontation that we have with the Yetzer Hara. And as we, hopefully, if we're able to do it, as we overcome, we kind of earn back, so to speak, this state of Adam before the sin. I mean, we were slowly and progressively earning territory that was previously held by the regime of the Yetzer Hara. That's what we're doing. And we're slowly injecting more life into our soul and more of an awareness of our spiritual identities. That's what it is. The Talmud tells us that the Yetzer Hara has 7 names. Talmud in the book of Sukkah on page 52. Sheva Shemos, 7 names. And it lists 7 different names. It's called the Yetzer Hara. Ra means evil, bad. It's Ra. But it has all sorts of other names. It's a stone. I will circumcise your stone heart. Oh, that's a reference to Yetzirah. It's a stone. It's a blunder. It's a michshol. It's phony. It's within you. It's embedded within you. It's tameh. It's impure. It's aral. It's uncircumcised. All these different verses in Scripture where the prophets describe this same thing in 7 different names, 7 different ways. And therefore says the Talmud has 7 different names. 7 different names. Now, what's the significance of it having 7 different names? Is it like alter egos? It's an alias. It has 7 aliases. That's not what it means. What it means is that this force operates on 7 different dimensions. There's some dimension of it that it's impure. It has whatever that means. There's something. There's a force of impurity. There's a force of evil. There's a force that's within a person that kind of consumes a person. There's a force of circumcision, which is the way of saying, or uncircumcised, which is the way of saying, like, kind of, it conceals, it covers up the purity, and so on. Each one of these names of the Yetzirah, it denotes a different element, a different dimension of the Yetzirah. So what happens? Someone goes to war, and it's always described in militaristic terms. Someone goes to war against the Yetzirah. They take it seriously. And they assemble all their weaponry and all their ammunition and all their talented strategy and tacticians. It's time to go to war. And they take it really seriously. And they have a plan. And they execute upon the plan. And they win. They actually do it. What happens? The Yetzirah is defeated, right? Yes, it's true. It's true. But the Yetzirah is a 7-headed serpent. Each one of these names is a different head to the serpent. Why am I saying it's 7-headed serpent? Because that's what the Talmud says. The Talmud describes the Yetzirah as a 7-headed serpent. Each one of those heads is a different thing attacking you. And you went to war and you lopped off one of the heads. Congratulations. And then you're like, okay, war's over. Now it's time to go back to peacetime. And you disassemble your army. And you go back home. And you're less vigilant. And before you know it, the Yetzirah strikes again. Comes back from the dead. It comes back from the dead. How'd that happen? So you think, oh my goodness, I must have not killed it. I must have not won the war. Because look at it, it's coming right back after me. And the truth is, no, you completely defeated it. You lopped off that head, it ain't coming back. But what happened? You forgot that it has 7 heads and has 7 different dimensions. And even though you completely eliminated one element of the Yetzirah, you're falling again. Why? You're falling again because the Yetzirah is once again coming after you. Because now there's a second dimension of the Yetzirah. It's time to go to war again against this one. And you win, and you don't realize that you think you're back where you started. We're back at square one. I made no progress because I'm at the same exact point where I was previously. What you don't realize is that now you're on to the 3rd and the 4th and the 5th and the 6th and the 7th head of this monstrous serpent. You fall 7 times and you get up. But once you do 7 times, once you defeat it 7 times, you're actually past it. You're past it because you've completely eliminated every part of this challenge. Now, in every area of our life, we have 7 battles. In every area of our life that we're trying to grow, we're trying to overcome the Yetzirah. There's 7 different battles we're going to have to fight. That's what the verse is telling us. The righteous fall 7 times. You fall because you have the Yetzirah. You defeat it, you fall again. 7 times. The 8th time, you don't fall. Why? Because the 8th time, in that particular area, in that particular challenge, you are now free and clear of every aspect of this monstrous force. That was the idea that I shared. Very, very interesting. I think it's interesting. I don't know. You let me know. Rabbi@wallbajima.com. Is this interesting? I think it's very interesting because it makes sense. You're going to fall 7 times. Why are you going to fall 7 times? Because you're going to fall because you have Yetzirah. And unless you're very vigilant, you're not going to win. And even if you are vigilant and you do win, there are 7 different battles in every single area of our spiritual ascent. 7, no more, and no fewer. Once you do all 7, you are free and clear. That's my suggestion to answer this question. Very interesting. But let's go on to the next question. And again, I'm going to read it to you the way it was written over here, because I didn't really think it was so artfully phrased, but this is what it said. And I thought it was a good question. I think it was actually an excellent, superb question. How can I stay true to myself and make my own choices when I feel pressured to fit in? Whether it's doing things I don't really agree with or wanting things just because everyone else does. That's the question. And I don't really know exactly. I even said that. I'm not sure exactly what the question is, because I wasn't exactly sure how do I say true to myself and maybe my choices when I feel pressure to fit in. But I think it's the conflict of a social pressure and behaving as a member of a cohort, of a group, of a tribe, versus making your own independent choices and acting as an individual. And then at the end part of the question, whether it's doing things I don't really agree with, meaning I guess it's following the masses to do what I don't agree with, or wanting things just because everyone else wants to, meaning that I want these things, not necessarily because I want them, but because everyone else has it, and therefore I feel compelled to kind of mimic everyone around me. But I thought this is a very valuable question, because we're very much social beings. We're social animals, if you will. And I thought it was a very legitimate question. And I mentioned when it was my turn to answer this, that we have a teaching in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says it was a great rabbi who was being poached. He was being poached. They wanted him to move to a different city. And they said, we'll give you so much money. You'll be the highest paid rabbi in the country. But just come join our city. Now, the thing is that the city that the rabbi was currently living in was a city that was filled with great sages, great academies, a very robust culture of Torah and righteousness. And the city that he was being offered the position to go join, it wasn't that sort of city. There wasn't that same rich, robust, dynamic Torah culture. So how do you respond to such an opportunity? They're going to roll back the Brinks truck for the rabbi. Make a nice, decent living. About to buy all the nice stuff. A new car. Maybe you could even lease. A vacation, a proper vacation. Someone told me a proper vacation means no kids, A. You got to fly, B. It's got to be a minimum of 96 hours. Got to be a minimum of 96 hours. So that's 4 days. That's a lot of days. No kids, got to fly. Can't just drive there. That doesn't count. So a week in Italy, that qualifies. But if you get a nice, serious income with a nice discretionary funds, it's a good opportunity. So how did the rabbi respond? The rabbi responded, if you give me all the money in the world, I'm not going to leave a place of Torah. Why? Why is it so important to be surrounded by other people who have these values? It's because the people that you surround yourself with, they will inform the kinds of values that you adopt. It wasn't like all the wicked people in the world moved to Sodom, to Sodom and Gomorrah. There was a kernel of cruelty and wickedness there, and the people that moved there, they absorbed and assimilated within themselves these horrific values. So if you're in a righteous place, you will naturally be impacted by the righteous values that are around you. If you, God forbid, find yourself in a place that has a different set of values, you're going to have to work really hard to avoid having those influences change who you are and what you value. And even though we are independent individual people, we're not delusional enough to think that we can inoculate ourselves, insulate ourselves from what happens around us. That's really the idea of the ark. That the ark is like this place where you're completely hermetically sealed from the world around you. It's very hard to have an ark long term. It's hard. So what I suggested in my answer is that when we see the Torah telling us to try to very much embrace a positive environment and also to flee a bad environment, it means the Torah takes this idea very seriously. And what I suggested is that we have to learn two skills. We have to learn the skill of opening up and learning and absorbing. When you're around righteous people, holy people, elevated people, refined people, even though it takes a dose of humility to learn from others, it does take a dose of humility because by definition, if you're learning, it means you're not perfect yet. Huh? What do you mean? I'm perfect, don't you know? No. The act of study is an act of humility. It is saying, no, I could learn more. I can improve. There's room for improvement. And that is what's needed when you're around the righteous and the refined and the learned to actually open up yourself and your heart and say, I want to absorb. I want to adopt some of these wonderful characteristics and wonderful qualities that I'm being exposed to. That's skill number one. And then skill number two is learn to do the opposite. If you find yourself in maybe an environment that's less ideal, around people that are not as refined, around people whose behavior is not ones that you want to emulate, who maybe people are doing the wrong things and saying the wrong things and valuing the wrong things, then you have to learn the opposite still. Maybe we call it the still of Noah. You have to make yourself into a little cocoon, a little ark that you can go in and inhabit for some time. And it's not fun because you're not cool if you're not part of the gang, right? If you're going to be, oh, you're so prudish, people are going to say that to you, right? Oh, you're better than us, right? You're better than us. It's hard to do because we all want the approval of our peers. We don't want to be outsiders, outcasts, ostracized, different, looked down upon. But it's imperative to learn that skill. Even if you're just around some people, you're just, there's a group of people talking and it's a way that's not appropriate. You have to learn the skill. You have to employ this skill. This skill is like, no, it's not for me to leave or to close up, to not allow it to penetrate who you actually are and change you. And then I added one more point, that even when you are in a good environment, and if you're fortunate enough to be in a good environment with, let's say, good family, a good community, a good school, good friends, like if you're fortunate enough to have that environment and you're trained, your parents, when you're 3 years old, they give you your first pair of tzitzis and a yarmulke. And they train you how to do the blessings, how to do the brachos, and how to do the prayers. And when you're 13, you get your first set of tefillin. Amazing. And when you're in the 5th grade, you start learning Talmud, you read Hebrew as a youngster. Like you're lucky. How lucky are you? You have all these incredible introductions to such a rich and powerful and beautiful life. But there's a risk. There's a risk that even though you've been trained really well, what do you have for yourself? If you're just mimicking your parents and your siblings and your friends and your teachers and your rabbis and your colleagues, if you're just mimicking and you have nothing for yourself, you're a husk. You're a spiritual husk of a human. And that's very dangerous. Because if you don't awaken your own soul and you don't awaken your own devotion, well, then what do you really have? You have very little. And of course, nothing spiritually is negligible. everything's very valuable. But if you're just there as someone who's just copying and just doing what you were told to do and behaving in a way that you were trained to behave, well, that is a very unfortunate loss of an opportunity. So we have to learn to absorb what we are exposed to that's good. We have to learn to ignore and to remove ourselves from things that are bad. And we have to, even with the things that we do, to make it ours, to invest our own heart and our own devotion and our own meaning into our mitzvos. Now, one thing I forgot to say, or maybe because they were pressuring me for time, they started shouting me down when the moderator's like, "Oh, your time's up." And then I had one more sentence I had to say, so I had to kind of raise my voice, the way they do in the debates, right? Now they turn off the microphones, right? That's the new thing. They turn off the microphones. But otherwise, it was just like, a bunch of teenagers screaming at each other. Anyhow, I did a little bit of that. I'm not so proud of it, but I did do it. But one of the things I didn't say was that my grandfather, blessed memory, he used to say, what is the level of conviction that we have to have in our faith? What's the level of conviction that we have to have in our faith? He says, imagine, he said a few different versions of this over the years. Imagine you're marooned on an island, and the people on the island are all atheists, militant atheists. And they won't give you anything unless you adopt their worldview. And they'll make fun of you and ridicule and mock you endlessly. You have to have the fortitude and the strength of character and the strength of faith to be able to endure that experience of ridicule and mockery by everyone that you know and you're supposed to for a decade, and not have it move you an iota off your faith. And that was like a standard of faith that he told his students. That's what we need to have. That's really learning the skill of not being subject to the bad qualities and the bad influences that you're going to be exposed to. Now, he is someone who can speak about this because he himself, for many, many years, he was in a place that bred heresy during the war. The divine providence led him to a place that was safe from the warfare, but very dangerous from the spiritual warfare. He's a place called Stockholm, Sweden, in Scandinavia. And he said that any yeshiva student, basically any yeshiva student that came there, within a month was ruined, was spiritually ruined. Why? Because the winds of heresy in this place were very, very intense. Very intense. And he says the only reason why I was able to maintain my standing as a Torah student, it was only because every single day, without fail, I would study Musar. Musar is, of course, the Torah lessons of self-development. That's the only reason why I survived. So what's the standard that he tells us? The standard of being impervious to the ridicule and the mockery and the derision of everyone that we know for a decade. That is a lot to ask for and something to aspire to. Even if we do have a high level of faith, this is a very high level of certainty and confidence in our faith. So these are some of the questions that came up. There were other questions. I'll read them to you very quickly here. One interesting question, maybe a very topical one, about AI. Is there anything wrong with using AI, artificial intelligence, to help with accomplishing tasks? Are there any limits as to what to use it for or not use it for? Interesting question. Another question. If everything is all planned out in our life, this is like a one-sentence question. That's like, we need like at least 5 years and 50 books to answer. But if everything is all planned out in our life, how do we still get to make decisions? One sentence, right? Very serious question. Other questions that came up over here. Why is there such an urge to speak lashon hara, to speak slander and gossip? Why is it so hard to find the Yetzer Hara in this? Another question, which actually was not posed. From a rabbinical perspective, should a woman work a prestigious job? Interesting. And this is another question. This one didn't come up either. But these were all a part of the questions that were submitted to the moderator. So many times in the past, rabbis thought Mashiach was coming, and he didn't. Now, also, many great rabbis are saying Mashiach is coming. So how do we know it's true if they were wrong before? Now, this is a question. As I say, every question's got at least one assumption. This question has some assumptions that, in my opinion, are very wrong. But anyhow, some interesting questions that came up and that did not come up in this. It's a useful format, where some people actually, they were allowed to ask questions just extemporaneously as well. So some good questions that come up extemporaneously with the students. But it's a good format where people can ask freely and ask anonymously and could hear answers that maybe help broaden their understanding and enrich their understanding and maybe even resolve some very serious questions. But let me know what you think about this format. I don't know if should we do some more of these types of sessions where we have questions and answers. And if you do, email me the questions. Rabbi, what would you become? Maybe we'll do this more often. We'll have a question and answer series or Ask the Rabbi series. One of the people there was saying, don't call it Ask the Rabbi. Call it Stump the Rabbi. That's the way we do it in our shul. And if whoever is able to stump the rabbi gets an extra bowl of cholent. That's what he said. Extra bowl of cholent. Extra bowl of the cholent stew. But anyhow, let me know what you think. Rabbi Wolbe@gmail.com.